The stone beneath my feet is cool, worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals. Here, in the quiet of the cell, the air is still, heavy with the scent of damp earth. The faint aroma of hemlock lingers, a green, bitter promise waiting in the shadows. There is no panic in this silence, only a deep, rhythmic breathing that matches the slow turning of the earth outside these walls. I hear the distant murmur of the city, the clatter of carts, the voices of men who rush to catch the sun before it sets. My own time feels suspended, stretched into an eternal present. The darkness is not an enemy, but a companion. It is a soft blanket that allows the mind to wander without the distraction of the visual world. I close my eyes and feel the weight of my own body, heavy and mortal, resting against the rough stone. The soul within feels lighter, unburdened by the chains of the flesh. This is the moment where the noise of the world fades, leaving only the internal dialogue. The gentle questioning that defined a life now turns inward to meet the final question with a calm, steady heart. The silence holds a profound comfort, inviting the weary mind to rest. I remember the olive branch lying undisturbed on the windowsill, a symbol of peace that has endured through the ages. The night deepens, and the city sleeps under the watchful gaze of the stars above. A single clay vessel sits on a low bench, its surface cool to the touch and unadorned. The texture of the stone beneath my hand feels rough yet enduring against the softness of the skin. Shadows stretch long and gentle as the sun begins its slow descent toward the western hills. The light shifts imperceptibly, marking the passage of hours without any sense of urgency or haste. The atmosphere is one of quiet contemplation and historical weight that settles over the space. Time seems to move slowly within these walls, as if the past remains present and accessible. The air feels still and heavy with the weight of memory and the presence of those who came before. I recall the dust motes dancing in the warm beams that pierced the open colonnade of the ancient structure. The stone floor was worn smooth by the footsteps of countless citizens over many generations. A faint scent of olive oil and dry parchment lingered in the still air of the covered walkway. The architecture stood as a silent witness to the debates and judgments that had shaped the city. The afternoon light fell softly across the marble columns of the Stoa Basileios, where legal matters were often discussed. A single clay vessel sat on a low bench, its surface cool to the touch and unadorned. The texture of the stone beneath one's hand felt rough yet enduring against the softness of the skin. The light continued to shift, marking the passage of hours without any sense of urgency. The scene evoked a sense of peace that allowed the mind to wander through the corridors of history. The stone remained cool and solid, grounding the observer in the reality of the ancient world. The quietude of the place invited a deep and meditative state of reflection on the events that occurred there. The air felt still and heavy with the weight of memory and the presence of those who came before. The light shifted imperceptibly, marking the passage of hours without any sense of urgency or haste. The scene evoked a sense of peace that allowed the mind to wander through the corridors of history. The stone remained cool and solid, grounding the observer in the reality of the ancient world. The quietude of the place invited a deep and meditative state of reflection on the events that occurred there. The air felt still and heavy with the weight of memory and the presence of those who came before. The moon rose slowly above the horizon, casting a silver glow on the ancient ruins. The night air was still and cool against the skin of the observer. The world seemed to rest in a calm and meditative state under the watchful stars. The history of the place felt present in the quiet stillness of the evening hour. The stones held the memory of many conversations and many lives lived long ago. The gentle rustle of leaves provided a soft rhythm for the mind to follow. The darkness wrapped around the city like a soft blanket of comfort and rest. The ancient world slept peacefully under the watch of the moon and the stars. In the year 399 BCE, the Athenian legal system operated on a principle where a jury of 500 citizens could decide a case by a simple majority vote, meaning a shift of just 25 votes would have acquitted the accused. This statistical reality remains a quiet fact, a small detail in the vast tapestry of the past. The memory of Socrates endured long after the political factions that condemned him had faded away. His legacy continued to shape philosophical discourse for centuries to come. The silence held a profound comfort, inviting the weary mind to rest and find solace in the quiet darkness. The olive branch lay undisturbed, a symbol of peace that had endured through the ages. The night deepened, and the city slept under the watchful gaze of the stars above. The stone beneath my feet is cool, worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals. I was born in Alopec, a small district where the air smelled of olive oil and wet clay. My father, Socrates, shaped rough blocks of marble into pillars that held up the temples of the gods. His hands were always dusted with white powder, and he taught me that stone remembers the touch of the chisel long after the tool has been put away. My mother, Narration, guided new life into the world with gentle hands and a calm voice. She spoke of pain as a temporary guest and of birth as a miracle that happens in the quiet dark. From them, I learned that one can shape matter and one can shape the mind, and both require patience. I grew up in a house that was not grand, filled with the sounds of neighbors arguing over water rights and the smell of baking bread drifting through the open window. The sun rose over the hills of Attica, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. and I walked barefoot through the dust of the streets. I did not sit in the great schools of the philosophers, for no such buildings existed yet to house my curiosity. Instead, I walked through the markets where the fishmongers shouted prices, and the weavers hung their colorful cloths to dry in the warm breeze. I spoke to the cobblers about the nature of a good shoe, and to the generals about the nature of a good war. Every person I met carried a piece of truth that they had not yet examined. I asked them to show me this truth, to hold it up to the light and see if it held its shape. Some of them grew angry when I questioned their certainty, for they preferred the comfort of their own assumptions to the discomfort of a new idea. They called me a gadfly, a stinging insect that kept the great horse of Athens from sleeping too deeply. I never meant to hurt them, only to wake them up to the life they were living. I claim to have heard a voice since I was a boy, a soft sound that warned me when I was about to make a mistake. This voice never told me what to do, only what not to do. Like a quiet hand on my shoulder in a crowded room, it guided me away from foolish paths and kept me from speaking words I would later regret. The voice was my constant companion, a silent partner in every conversation I ever had. I spent my days in the agora, standing in the shade of the porticos while the merchants set up their stalls. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meat and the dust of the road. I watched the young men practice their wrestling in the gymnasium, their bodies glistening with oil under the bright sun. They were strong and fast, yet I wondered if they knew what they were strong for. I asked them about courage and justice, and they answered with the confidence of youth, who have never been tested by true loss. I told them that I knew nothing, for that was the only honest thing I could say. My ignorance was a tool, a way to clear the ground so that we could build something new together. The rumors about me began to spread when the jurors were still children playing in the dirt. They said I studied the stars and the clouds and that I could make the weaker argument defeat the stronger. These stories were not true, yet they took root in the minds of men who feared the unknown. I walked through the city with a simple tunic and a worn cloak, unbothered by the laughter or the anger of those who passed. The texture of the rough wool against my skin was a constant reminder of my own mortality and my place in the world. I ate simple food and drank water from the public fountains, finding satisfaction in the basic needs of the body. The heat of the summer sun was a friend to me, and the cold of the winter wind was a test of endurance. I did not seek wealth or power, for I found that these things often clouded the mind and distorted the soul. My only desire was to understand the nature of virtue and to live a life that was worth examining. I believed that the unexamined life was not worth living for any human being. no matter how rich or famous they might be. This belief was the foundation of my existence, the rock upon which I built every day of my life. In the quiet study of a 17th century scholar, a single candle flickers beside a heavy oak desk. The room is lined with shelves that reach toward the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes of classical texts. A large window looks out onto a garden where the moon casts a silver path across the sleeping grass. The air smells faintly of old paper, beeswax, and the dried lavender placed in the corners to keep moths away. On the desk lies an open copy of the Phaedo, its pages yellowed with age and worn by the touch of many hands. A quill pen rests in an inkwell, its tip dried and still, waiting for a thought that has not yet formed. The silence of the room is deep and absolute, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. Shadows dance gently on the walls as the flame moves with the slow rhythm of the night air. Outside, the wind rustles the leaves of an ancient oak tree, creating a sound like distant whispers. The scholar sits back in the wooden chair, feeling the weight of the centuries in the stillness of the room. The text before him speaks of a man who died 2,000 years ago, yet his words remain as fresh as the morning dew. The candlelight illuminates the Greek letters, making them appear to float in the dim atmosphere of the study. Time seems to slow down in this space, allowing the mind to wander through the arguments of the past. The warmth of the fire spreads through the room, creating a sense of safety and profound peace. The scholar closes the book slowly, feeling the texture of the cover under their fingertips. The room returns to a state of quiet contemplation as the fire burns low and the night deepens. The years passed like the turning of the seasons, and I grew older while the city remained young and restless. The young men who once followed me with such enthusiasm now grew into men who held positions of power and influence. Some of them remembered the lessons I taught, while others forgot them in the pursuit of their own ambitions. The accusations against me began to take shape, formed from the discomfort I caused to the established order of things. Anytus and his associates viewed my methods as a threat to the stability of the city, a dangerous force that could not be controlled. They saw my questions as attacks on the gods, and my conversations as a corruption of the youth. I accepted these charges with a calmness that surprised many of my observers, for I had long ago made peace with the idea of death. I believed that a life without examination was not worth living, and I was willing to die for that belief. The trial itself was a reflection of the tensions within Athenian society at that time, a clash between the old ways and the new thoughts. I did not. The stone beneath my feet is cool, worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals. Here, in the quiet of the prison cell, the air is still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint, lingering aroma of the hemlock that will soon arrive. There is no panic in this silence, only a deep, rhythmic breathing that matches the slow turning of the earth outside these walls. I hear the distant murmur of the city, the clatter of carts, the voices of men who rush to catch the sun before it sets. Yet my own time feels suspended, stretched into an eternal present. The darkness is not an enemy, but a companion, a soft blanket that allows the mind to wander without the distraction of the visual world. I close my eyes and feel the weight of my own body, heavy and mortal, resting against the rough stone, while the soul within feels lighter, unburdened by the chains of the flesh. This is the moment where the noise of the world fades, leaving only the internal dialogue, the gentle questioning that has defined a life, now turning inward to meet the final question with a calm, steady heart. The streets of Athens were my true classroom, a place where the dust of the agora mingled with the sweat of laborers and the perfume of merchants. I walked those paths for decades, my bare feet feeling the uneven cobblestones that had been trodden by generations before me. The sun beat down on the marble columns, casting long shadows that stretched across the marketplace like the fingers of time itself. It was here that I found my purpose, not in the quiet of a study or the silence of a library, but in the chaotic hum of daily life. I sought out the young men who gathered in the gymnasium, their bodies glistening with oil, their minds eager for the kind of wisdom that could not be bought or sold. I asked them questions, simple questions at first, about justice, about courage, about the nature of a good life. They would answer with confidence, their voices ringing clear in the open air, full of the certainty that only youth can possess. I listened, I nodded, and then I asked again, gently peeling back the layers of their assumptions until they stood bare before the truth. This method of questioning was not a weapon, though it often felt like one to those who held their beliefs too tightly. It was a tool, much like the chisel my father used to shape the stone, designed to reveal the form hidden within the rough block. I never claimed to have the answers, for I knew that wisdom was a thing to be sought, not a thing to be possessed. The sophists of the time would charge a coin for their lectures, offering a finished product to anyone who could pay the price. I offered only my questions, and in doing so, I gave them the gift of thinking for themselves. The conversations flowed like a river, sometimes calm and shallow, sometimes deep and turbulent, but always moving forward toward the sea of understanding. I remember the smell of the olive trees that lined the path to the academy, their silver leaves rustling in the breeze, a sound that seemed to whisper secrets to those who knew how to listen. The dialogues that followed my death were written by my students, men who remembered the sound of my voice and the way I would tilt my head when a thought struck them. They captured the essence of our exchanges, freezing the fluid motion of our words into the static form of text. These writings became the foundation of a new way of thinking, a method that would spread far beyond the walls of Athens and the borders of Greece. The academy, established after my passing, became a place where mathematics and natural science were studied alongside the dialectics of the soul. It was a sanctuary for the mind, a place where the questions I had asked in the marketplace were refined and expanded upon by generations of scholars. The influence of these early works extended far beyond the immediate circle of students who gathered around the philosopher, shaping the intellectual traditions of the Western world for millennia. In the quiet study of a 17th century scholar, a single candle flickers beside a heavy oak desk. The room is lined with shelves that reach toward the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that smell of old paper and dust. The light from the flame dances across the pages, illuminating the handwritten notes of a man who has spent his life trying to understand the words of a dead Athenian. Outside, the wind blows against the glass, a soft, rhythmic sound that matches the turning of the pages. The scholar dips his quill into the inkwell, the scratch of the nib on paper, providing a steady rhythm to the quiet room. He reads the words of Plato, tracing the arguments with his finger, feeling the weight of the centuries pressing down on the desk. The candle burns low, casting long shadows that stretch across the floor, and the room feels suspended in time, a place where the past and present meet in the silence of the night. The specific dates of composition for these dialogues remain a subject of scholarly debate among experts today. Yet the impact of the method remains undeniable. Some scholars believe the early dialogues represent the historical man more accurately than the later works, while others argue that the character evolves to reflect the philosophical interests of the writer. Despite these uncertainties, the legacy of these interactions is preserved in the detailed descriptions found within the Platonic corpus. The setting of these dialogues often takes place in familiar locations such as the agora or the gymnasium, places where the air was thick with the scent of humanity. The conversations flow naturally between friends and acquaintances who share a common interest in moral philosophy, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of the day. The tone of these exchanges is typically calm and inquisitive rather than confrontational or aggressive, a reflection of the belief that truth is found through collaboration rather than conflict. Socrates often feigned ignorance to encourage his interlocutors to articulate their own beliefs more clearly, a technique that revealed contradictions in their thinking and led to deeper understanding of complex concepts. This approach was not a deception, but a genuine expression of the belief that the unexamined life was not worth living. The legacy of these interactions is preserved in the detailed descriptions found within the Platonic corpus, which continues to be read in classrooms and universities around the world as essential primary sources. They offer a window into the intellectual climate of classical Athens during the 5th century before the Common Era, a time when the foundations of Western thought were being laid. The image of the philosopher in the marketplace is a lasting symbol of the pursuit of truth, a symbol that continues to resonate with people who seek meaning and understanding in their own lives. The development of his ideas was a process that transformed the intellectual landscape of the ancient world, spreading from the streets of Athens to the far corners of the Mediterranean. The works were translated into Latin, making them accessible to a wider audience across the empire, and later preserved by scholars in the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. During the Middle Ages, these texts were hidden away in monasteries and libraries, waiting for the Renaissance to bring them back into the light. Humanists like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola championed the teachings of Socrates and Plato, viewing the dialogues as a source of spiritual and intellectual renewal for their own time. The invention of the printing press allowed for the mass production of these texts, spreading their influence even further, until the words of a man who never wrote a single sentence became the most widely read in history. Modern philosophers from Descartes to Nietzsche have grappled with the ideas presented by Socrates, finding in his life and death powerful reminder of the cost of intellectual integrity. The specific artworks depicting Socrates often show him in the moment of his trial or his final conversation, capturing the essence of a man who valued wisdom above all other human pursuits. Sculptures from the Hellenistic period portray him with a distinctive beard and a thoughtful expression. These images capturing the spirit of a man who walked the streets of Athens in search of truth. The locations associated with his life, such as the prison where he died, have become sites of historical memory, places where visitors can walk the same streets that Socrates once traversed in his daily wanderings. The legacy of his major works endures as a testament to the power of human reason and dialogue, texts that continue to inspire new generations to question, to think, and to seek the truth. The quiet endurance of his words ensures that his voice will never truly fall silent, echoing through the ages as a guide for those who seek wisdom. His influence permeates the fields of ethics, politics, and education in the modern world, shaping the way we think about justice and the good life. The method of inquiry that he pioneered, the relentless questioning that strips away false assumptions, remains a vital part of the philosophical tradition that began in ancient Greece. It is a tradition that values the process of the air in the prison cell holds the taste of dust and the metallic tang of iron chains. Outside, the city of Athens breathes with a feverish rhythm, shaken by the long war that drained its gold and broke its spirit. The Peloponnesian conflict had ended only years before, leaving behind a landscape of silence and suspicion, where once there was the clamor of victory. I walked those streets not as a soldier, but as a man who asked questions about the nature of courage and the meaning of justice. The people of the city were tired, their hearts hardened by defeat and the brief, bloody rule of the 30 tyrants. They looked for someone to blame, a figure to cast out so that the wounds of the state might finally begin to heal. I became that figure, not because I sought the role, but because my voice seemed to threaten the fragile peace they desperately needed. The charges brought against me were clear in their accusation, though the truth behind them was far more complex. They claimed I did not honor the gods of the city, that I introduced new spirits into the minds of young men. They said I corrupted the youth, turning them away from the duties of the citizen and toward the dangerous path of independent thought. In a time when religion and politics were woven into a single, unbreakable thread, such an accusation was a death sentence. The courtroom was filled with men who feared the very questions I asked, for those questions stripped away the comfortable lies they told themselves. I stood before a jury of 501 citizens, chosen by lot, their faces a mosaic of anger, confusion, and fear. The vote was not a landslide, but the margin was enough to seal the fate of a man who had spent his life seeking the truth. The law of Athens was a machine that ground down those who refused to stop moving, and I had refused to stop. I remembered the young men who had followed me, some of whom later became the very tyrants who ruled the city with an iron fist. The association was enough to condemn me, even if my own hands had never held a sword or plotted a coup. The city needed a scapegoat to restore its shattered order, and I was the one who stood in the way. My method of inquiry, the relentless questioning that exposed the contradictions in their beliefs, was seen as an act of war against the social fabric. They wanted answers, simple and absolute, while I offered only more questions, more doubt, more uncertainty. This doubt was the poison they could not digest, the new deity they could not name. The trial itself was a performance of civic anxiety, a desperate attempt to silence the voice that challenged the foundations of their world. I spoke of virtue, of the care of the soul, of the importance of living an examined life. These words fell on ears that were closed to anything but the immediate needs of survival and the restoration of power. The verdict was delivered. a guilty finding that marked the end of a life dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom. The sentence was death, to be carried out by the drinking of a cup of hemlock poison. There was no anger in my heart as I accepted this fate, only a quiet resignation to the will of the city and the natural order of things. I had lived my life according to reason, and I would die according to reason. The fear that gripped the courtroom did not touch me, for I had long ago made peace with the idea of death. The body is a vessel, temporary and fragile, while the soul is eternal and unchanging. To fear the end of the vessel is to misunderstand the nature of existence. I thought of the long journey of my life, the days spent in the marketplace, the nights spent in conversation, with friends and strangers alike. The sun had risen and set countless times, illuminating the faces of those who sought wisdom, and those who sought only to be right. Now, the sun would set for the last time, and I would step into the darkness with a calm heart. The hemlock would be brought, the cup would be held, and the poison would flow through my veins. It would be a gentle end, a release from the burdens of the flesh. The city would go on, the seasons would turn, and the questions would remain unanswered for those who refused to ask them. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would grow in the minds of those who heard my words. The legacy of this trial was not the death of a man, but the birth of a new way of thinking. The conflict between the individual conscience and the collective will of the state had reached its climax, and the state had won the battle. But the war for the mind was just beginning. The memory of this moment would endure long after. The stones of the prison had crumbled into dust. The stone walls of the cell are rough to the touch, marked by the hands of countless prisoners who came before and will come after. A single shaft of light cuts through the high window, illuminating a small patch of the floor, where dust motes dance in the still air. The light moves slowly across the stone, a silent clock marking the passage of the final hours. The air is cool and dry, smelling faintly of the earth and the stone itself. There is a sense of profound stillness here, a quiet that seems to hold the entire world in its embrace. The chains lie on the floor, heavy and cold, no longer binding the spirit that has already begun to rise. The silence is not empty but full, filled with the weight of a life lived in the pursuit of truth. The hemlock cup arrives, held by a man whose face is turned away, unwilling to meet the gaze of the condemned. The liquid inside is dark and bitter, smelling of the earth and the plants that grew in the fields outside the city walls. I take the cup with a steady hand, feeling the cool ceramic against my palm. There is no trembling, no hesitation, only a deep sense of acceptance. The poison is not an enemy, but a friend, a guide to the next stage of the journey. I drink the cup in one long draught, feeling the bitter taste spread through my mouth and down my throat. The effect is slow and gentle, a cooling sensation that spreads from the stomach to the limbs. The body begins to feel heavy, the legs growing weak as the poison takes hold. I sit on the stone floor, leaning against the wall, watching the light fade from the small patch of the floor. The voice of the jailer speaks softly, telling me to walk a little to speed the process. But I remain still, content to let the poison do its work. The pain is minimal, a distant H that fades into a deep, dreamless sleep. The mind remains clear, even as the body slips away, holding on to the questions that have defined a life. The fear of death is gone, replaced by a profound curiosity about what lies beyond. The city outside continues its noisy, chaotic life, unaware that a man has just died in its prison cell. The trial is over, the sentence has been carried out, and the world moves on. But the questions remain echoing in the silence, waiting for someone to answer them. The life of Socrates ends here, in this small, dark cell. But the work of the soul continues. The courage to face death with a calm heart is the final lesson, the ultimate act of wisdom. The body dies, but the spirit lives on in the minds of those who seek the truth. The story of this trial becomes a myth, a symbol of the conflict between the individual and the state. The memory of the man who walked the streets of Athens, asking questions and challenging beliefs, endures for centuries. The legacy of this moment is a reminder that the pursuit of wisdom is worth any price, even the price of life itself. The courage to live unexamined. Life is the greatest courage of all. The final hours are a testament to the power of reason and the strength of the human spirit. The cup is empty, the poison has done its work, and the journey is complete. The silence returns, deep and absolute, holding the memory of a life well lived. The stone beneath my feet is cool, worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals. Here, in the quiet of the prison cell, the air is still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint, lingering aroma of the hemlock that will soon arrive. There is no panic in this silence, only a deep, rhythmic breathing that matches the slow turning of the earth outside these walls. I hear the distant murmur of the city, the clatter of carts, the voices of men who rush to catch the sun before it sets. Yet my own time feels suspended, stretched into an eternal present. The darkness is not an enemy, but a companion, a soft blanket that allows the mind to wander without the distraction of the visual world. I close my eyes and feel the weight of my own body, heavy and mortal, resting against the rough stone, while the soul within feels lighter, unburdened by the chains of the flesh. This is the moment where the noise of the world fades, leaving only the internal dialogue, the gentle questioning that has defined a life. Now turning inward to meet the final question with a calm, steady heart, The charges brought against me were not born of the moment, but rooted in the deep soil of decades past. I walked through the agora asking questions that unsettled the certainty of men who believed they knew everything. My accusers claimed I did not honor the gods the city recognized, and that I introduced new divine powers into the lives of the young. These were serious words in a time when religion and law were woven together like the threads of a strong rope. The city had just survived a long and exhausting war, and the people were desperate for stability. They feared that my constant questioning would loosen the bonds that held the community together. They wanted order, and I offered only the difficult task of thinking clearly. The prosecution argued that my influence led the youth away from their civic duties and toward a dangerous independence of mind. I stood before the jury of 500 men, listening to the accusations that had taken root, while the jurors were still children playing in the streets. They spoke of rumors that I searched into the earth beneath and speculated about the heaven above. They said I made the worse argument appear the better in my public debates. I knew these stories were old and false. Yet they had taken possession of the minds of the citizens. I did not even know the names of the earliest slanderers who started these whispers. Perhaps a comic poet was the source, for Aristophanes once depicted me in a play as a teacher who showed young men how to win arguments against their own fathers. That fictional portrait contributed significantly to the public perception of the real philosopher. I denied teaching rhetoric for money or trying to make the worse argument appear better. I insisted that I sought truth rather than victory in my conversations with others. I maintained that I knew nothing and that my wisdom lay in knowing my own ignorance. I believed that the unexamined life was not worth living for a human being. The afternoon light filtered softly through the high windows of a quiet Athenian courtyard, casting long, gentle shadows across the worn stone floor. A single clay oil lamp sat unlit on a low wooden table, its wick dry and untouched by flame. Nearby, a small terracotta bowl held a few dried olives, their skins wrinkled and dark against the pale earth of the vessel. The air smelled faintly of dust and the dry herbs hanging from the rafters above. Outside the open archway, the distant sound of a water wheel turned slowly in the river, a rhythmic and soothing creak that marked the passage of time. A woven mat lay folded in the corner, its fibers soft and worn from years of use by many feet. The silence of the room was heavy but peaceful, filled only by the settling of the house and the occasional rustle of a breeze. Sunlight warmed the rough texture of the plaster walls, highlighting the subtle variations in the color of the mud and straw. A small potted plant sat by the window, its leaves turning slowly toward the light with a patient, silent grace. The scene remained still and undisturbed, offering a moment of pure tranquility for the weary traveler to rest. I wore simple clothing and walked barefoot through the streets of Athens in all seasons. I ate little food and drank only when necessary for my health and strength. I slept on simple mats and lived without the comforts of wealth or luxury. I married a woman named Xanthip who was known for her sharp tongue and temper. We had 3 sons together who grew up during the later years of my life. I raised them with the same values of inquiry and self-examination that I held dear. I taught them to question authority and to seek knowledge through their own efforts. The trial took place within the legal framework of the Athenian democracy, despite the recent political instability. The proceedings reflected the deep tensions between traditional religious authority and emerging philosophical inquiry. The city feared that my methods would undermine the social cohesion needed for recovery. The specific formal charges included failing to acknowledge the gods of the city and introducing new deities. These accusations were serious in a society where religion and politics were deeply intertwined. The defense could not fully overcome the prevailing mood of suspicion and fear in the courtroom. The jury found me guilty by a margin that suggested a divided but decisive public opinion. The sentence of death was carried out by drinking a cup of hemlock poison. This event marked the end of a life dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom and virtue. A divine voice, which I called my demonic sign, often spoke to me in my later years. It kept me from making foolish mistakes throughout my life. I mentioned that this voice had not stopped me from speaking in the courtroom, for it knew that death was not a bad thing. I stated that this voice had kept me from making foolish mistakes throughout my life. I mentioned that my earliest accusers began spreading rumors when the jurors were still children. These rumors claimed I searched into the earth beneath and speculated about the heaven above. They said I made the worse argument appear the better in my public debates. I noted that these charges were of ancient date and took root in young minds. I explained that these false stories had taken possession of the minds of the citizens. I pointed out that I did not even know the names of these earliest slanderers. I suggested that a comic poet might be the source of these specific names and accusations. Aristophanes depicted me in the play The Clouds as a sophist teaching youth to justify beating their fathers. This play was performed in 423 BC and portrayed me as a corrupter of morals. The character in the play taught a young man how to win arguments against his own father. This fictional portrayal contributed significantly to the public perception of the real philosopher. The real Socrates denied teaching rhetoric for money or trying to make the worse argument appear better. I insisted that I sought truth rather than victory in my conversations with others. I maintained that I knew nothing and that my wisdom lay in knowing my own ignorance. I believed that the unexamined life was not worth living for a human being. My friend Crito visited me in prison and proposed a plan for me to escape my confinement. I firmly rejected this offer because I believed that escaping would constitute an unjust and morally wrong act. I argued that the laws of Athens were just even if the legitimacy of laws in general could be questioned. I maintained that judicial decisions made on the basis of those laws must be carried out once they were pronounced. I believed that disrespecting such decisions would lead to the destruction of the laws themselves. This argument in the dialogue Crito belongs to the domain of the philosophy of law and morality. I chose to accept my death penalty rather than violate the social contract I had lived under for decades. The dialogue Crito described a conversation during my subsequent imprisonment before the final moment arrived. The physical details of my death have been preserved through the writings of my student Plato. My death has almost always been attributed to my drinking an extract of poison hemlock known as conium maculatum. Modern medical analysis suggests that the plant causes symptoms like vomiting and abdominal pain before death occurs. Plato likely omitted these unpleasant clinical effects to align the narrative with my philosophical ideals of a peaceful passing. The stone walls of this cell hold a coolness that seeps into the bones, a steady reminder that the earth remains constant while men change their minds. I sit here waiting for the cup, not with fear, but with the quiet acceptance of a traveler who has reached the end of a long road. The air is still heavy with the scent of damp clay and the faint, a dry smell of herbs hanging from the rafters above. My thoughts drift back to the trial, not as a storm of anger, but as a slow, gathering tide that finally washed over the shore. The city of Athens was tired after the long war, its spirit frayed by years of conflict, and the sudden collapse of its own government. In that fragile moment, the people sought to restore order by removing those who seemed to challenge the foundations of their belief. I was one of those figures, a man who walked the streets, asking questions that made the powerful uncomfortable. The charges brought against me were serious in a society where religion and politics were woven into the same fabric. They said I did not honor the gods the city recognized, and that I introduced new deities to confuse the young. These accusations struck at the heart of the community, for a society needs shared gods to hold itself together when the world feels like it is falling apart. The courtroom was a place of deep tension, filled with the murmurs of men who feared that my methods would undermine the social cohesion needed for recovery. The prosecution argued that my influence led the youth away from accepted civic duties, turning them into questioners rather than followers. I could not fully overcome the prevailing mood of suspicion that filled the room like a thick fog. The jury found me guilty by a margin that suggested a divided but decisive public opinion, a reflection of the city's own fractured soul. The sentence of death was carried out by drinking a cup of hemlock poison, an event that marked the end of a life dedicated to the pursuit of wisdom and virtue. The historical record of these events is complex, shaped by varying accounts from those who stood nearby. Some texts contain no specific facts about the trial itself, focusing instead on the doctrines of my students. Other sources describe the decay of Greek city-states long after my time, contrasting sharply with the vibrant yet volatile world I inhabited. The precise location within the agora is not detailed in every record, and the Stoa Poikile is not explicitly mentioned in all accounts. The theme of guilt by association appears in titles but lacks elaboration in some excerpts, leaving the full picture to be pieced together from fragments. I often spoke of a demonic voice that guided me, a quiet inner sound that warned against making foolish mistakes. This voice had kept me from error throughout my life, a constant companion in the noisy marketplace of Athens. I told the court that my earliest accusers began spreading rumors when the jurors were still children. These rumors claimed I searched into the earth beneath and speculated about the heaven above, making the worse argument appear the better in public debates. These false stories had taken root in young minds and grew into a forest of suspicion that shaded the truth. I explained that these charges were of ancient date, taking possession of the minds of the citizens long before the formal charges were written. I pointed out that I did not even know the names of these earliest slanderers, for they were like ghosts that whispered in the dark. I suggested that a comic poet might be the source of these specific names and accusations, a man who wrote plays to make people laugh rather than think. Aristophanes depicted me in the play The Clouds as a sophist teaching youth to justify beating their fathers. This play was performed in 423 BC and portrayed me as a corrupter of morals, a character who taught a young man how to win arguments against his own father. This fictional portrayal contributed significantly to the public perception of the real philosopher, coloring the way men saw me in the streets. The real Socrates denied teaching rhetoric for money, or trying to make the worse argument appear better. I insisted that I sought truth rather than victory in my conversations with others, walking barefoot through the dust of the agora in all seasons. I wore simple clothing and ate little food, drinking only when necessary for my health and strength. I slept on simple mats and lived without the comforts of wealth or luxury, finding my riches in the clarity of a clear mind. I married a woman named Xanthippe who was known for her sharp tongue and temper, and we had 3 sons together who grew up during the later years of my life. I raised them with the same values of inquiry and self-examination that I held dear, teaching them to question authority and to seek knowledge through their own eyes. My mission was a divine gift that I could not abandon for the sake of safety, a task assigned to me by the oracle at Delphi. The oracle declared that no one was wiser than I, a statement that sparked my lifelong mission of examination and led me to ask the wise men of Athens about their knowledge. I found that they knew nothing of what they claimed to know, and so I continued my work of questioning the certainty of others. I believed that the unexamined life was not worth living for a human being, for without reflection, we are merely sleepwalkers in our own days. The trial represented a pivotal moment in the history of Western thought and justice, highlighting the conflict between the individual conscience and the collective will of the state. The memory of Socrates endured long after the cup was emptied, a testament to the power of reason and the importance of self-examination. The afternoon light filtered softly through the high windows of a quiet Athenian courtyard, casting long, gentle shadows across the worn stone floor. A single clay oil lamp sat unlit on a low wooden table, its wick dry and untouched by flame. Nearby, a small terracotta bowl held a few dried olives, their skins wrinkled and dark against the pale earth of the vessel. The air smelled faintly of dust and the dry herbs hanging from the rafters above. Outside the open archway, the distant sound of a water wheel turned slowly in the river, a rhythmic and soothing creak that marked the passage of time. A woven mat lay folded in the corner, its fibers soft and worn from years of use by many feet. The silence of the room was heavy but peaceful, filled only by the settling of the house and the occasional rustle of a breeze. Sunlight warmed the rough texture of the plaster walls, highlighting the subtle variations in the color of the mud and straw. A small potted plant sat by the window, its leaves turning slowly toward the light with a patient, silent grace. The scene remained still and undisturbed, offering a moment of pure tranquility for the weary mind. The dialogues of Plato and Xenophon provide the core of what is known as the Socratic problem in modern historical studies, where historians must distinguish between the historical man and the literary character created by these writers. Nearly every major work of Plato is, in some way, devoted to or dependent on this distinction, presenting a man who questioned the nature of virtue, justice, and the good life through relentless inquiry. The character of Socrates appears as the dominant figure in most of these texts, a voice that challenges the reader to look deeper. The historical record suggests that I frequently referred to my divine sign in the accounts provided by both Plato and Xenophon a guiding principle that often warned me against specific actions or decisions. I followed the teachings of the Delphic oracle. As a central part of my life and philosophy, letting its words shape my path through the years, the trial of Socrates in 399 BCE remains the most documented event of my later years, a moment frozen in time by the words of those who were present. Plato was present at the trial of Socrates, but was not permitted to speak, recording the proceedings in a text known as the Apology, which details the defense offered by the accused. I identified Anytus as one of my current accusers within the narrative of this famous defense, a man whose fear of my influence drove him to seek my destruction. I expressed fear of these men more than of the formal charges brought against me by the state, for their anger was a fire that burned hotter than the law. The death of Socrates is described in Plato's dialogue, the Phaedo, written an unknown time afterwards from accounts by others. This work depicts the final hours of the philosopher as he calmly discusses the immortality of the soul with his friends. A scene of profound serenity where I accepted my fate with intellectual clarity and emotional composure. The hemlock poison was administered slowly, allowing for a prolonged period of philosophical conversation before the end, a final gift of time to share wisdom with those who loved me. These dialogues form the core of what is known as the Socratic problem, forcing us to separate the man from the myth. The circumstances of my death remain a subject of scholarly debate regarding the motivations of my accusers, yet my commitment to my principles never wavered until the very end of my days. I accepted the verdict with calmness and continued to reason even as I faced the hemlock, viewing my personal struggles as internal battles against ignorance rather than external conflicts with the state. The man who looked like a satyr possessed a spirit that transcended the limitations of his time, a spirit that found its footing in the year 399 BCE when the Athenian democracy tried and executed him. The stone walls of my cell held a coolness that seeped into the bones, a constant reminder of the earth that would soon welcome me back. Friends came and went, their faces etched with a sorrow I could no longer feel, only observe with a detached clarity. They spoke of escape, of fleeing to other cities where my name was still spoken with reverence rather than fear. I listened to their frantic plans and shook my head gently, knowing that to run would be to betray the very laws I had lived by for 70 years. The decision to stay was not made in a moment of panic, but through a long, slow process of reasoning that felt as natural as breathing. My body was heavy, yet my mind remained sharp, tracing the lines of argument as clearly as a sculptor tracing the grain of marble. The cup of poison sat on the small table, its dark liquid reflecting the single shaft of light that pierced the gloom. It was not a threat, but a promise, a final step in a journey that had begun decades ago in the dusty agoras of Athens. The guards who had watched me with suspicion now treated me with a quiet respect, their hands resting on their spears as they waited for the inevitable. I felt no bitterness toward the men who had voted for my death, for they were merely following the laws of a city that felt threatened by my questions. Their fear was understandable, and I forgave them easily in the silence of that final afternoon. The conversation with Crito had been gentle, a last exchange of thoughts on duty and the nature of justice before the end. He had begged me to save myself, to flee to Thessaly, where I could live out my days in peace, but I had refused. To leave would be to admit that the laws of Athens were wrong, and I could not do that. The laws had raised me, educated me, and protected me, and to break them now would be to destroy the very foundation of my existence. I drank the hemlock with a steady hand, feeling the cold liquid slide down my throat, tasting the bitterness of the herb. The numbness began in my feet, a slow, creeping cold that moved up my legs with a gentle, rhythmic pace. I lay down on the hard floor, watching the ceiling as the light began to fade from the room. My friends wept around me, but I spoke to them of the soul and its journey beyond the body, urging them to find comfort in reason. The cold reached my chest, and my breathing slowed, becoming shallow and soft like the wind moving through dry grass. In that final moment, there was no fear, only a profound sense of completion, as if a long and difficult task had finally been finished. The silence that followed was not empty, but full of a peace that had been sought for a lifetime. The story of my end became a seed that would grow into a forest of thought for centuries to come. My students gathered around the memory of those last hours, writing down the words I had spoken to preserve them for the future. They formed schools of philosophy, each interpreting my life and death in their own way, yet all united by the method of questioning that I had taught them. The Megarian school rose from the ashes of my execution, with Euclides of Megara writing dialogues that kept the spirit of inquiry alive. He and others like Bryson and Stilpo worked tirelessly to capture the essence of my arguments, ensuring that the voice of the questioner would never be silenced. These early texts were not perfect, for they were written by human hands with human limitations, but they served as the first vessels for a new kind of wisdom. The accounts of my trial and death were later recorded by Plato and Xenophon, whose works became the primary sources for all who came after. They painted a picture of a man who faced death with courage, a model that would inspire philosophers for millennia to come. The charge of irreverence that had led to my conviction was forgotten, replaced by a reputation for moral integrity and rational thought. I became a figure of legend, a symbol of the power of the human mind to stand firm against the pressures of the state. The academy that followed my death became a center of learning, preserving my methods of inquiry for nearly 1,000 years. It was a place where mathematics, dialectics, and natural science flourished, all rooted in the Socratic method of asking questions to reveal the truth. The specific dates of the composition of these dialogues remain a subject of debate among scholars, yet the impact of the work is undeniable. Some argue that the early dialogues capture the historical man more accurately, while others see the evolution of a character shaped by the interests of the writer. Despite these uncertainties, the method of questioning remains a cornerstone of education and logic in the modern world. The texts continue to be read in classrooms around the globe, offering a window into the intellectual climate of classical Athens. The conversations that took place in the agora and the gymnasium were calm and inquisitive, filled with friends seeking to understand the nature of virtue. I often feigned ignorance to encourage others to articulate their own beliefs, revealing contradictions that led to deeper understanding. This technique of questioning was not a trick, but a genuine desire to uncover the truth hidden beneath the surface of opinion. The legacy of these interactions is preserved in the detailed descriptions found within the Platonic corpus, a testament to the enduring power of dialogue. In the quiet study of a 17th century scholar, a single candle flickers beside a heavy oak desk. The room is lined with shelves that reach toward the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes of classical texts. A large window looks out onto a garden where the moon casts a silver path across the sleeping grass. The air smells faintly of old paper, beeswax, and the dried lavender placed in the corners to keep moths away. On the desk lies an open copy of the Phaedo, its pages yellowed with age and worn by the touch of many hands. A quill pen rests in an inkwell, its tip dried and still, waiting for a thought that has not yet formed. The silence of the room is deep and absolute, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. Shadows dance gently on the walls as the flame moves with the slow rhythm of the night air. Outside, the wind rustles the leaves of an ancient oak tree, creating a sound like distant whispers. The scholar sits back in the wooden chair, feeling the weight of the centuries in the stillness of the room. The text before him speaks of a man who died 2,000 years ago, yet his words remain as fresh as the morning dew. The candlelight illuminates the Greek letters, making them. The ink on the page has long since dried, turning from black to a soft, dusty brown that matches the old wood of the desk. My own hand did not write a single word of what followed. Yet the story grew like a vine climbing an ancient wall, finding purchase where I left only questions. A woman named Johanna held the brush when I could no longer hold it, her fingers stained with the dark oil of grief and the bright pigment of hope. She gathered the scattered letters and the rough sketches that my brother Theo had kept in a drawer, arranging them with a patience that felt like the slow turning of seasons. She saw the fire in the blue skies and the yellow wheat, not as the ravings of a madman, but as a language waiting to be spoken to the world. The house in Arles was silent then, filled with the smell of turpentine and the faint, metallic scent of rain on hot cobblestones, but her work made it loud with possibility. She moved through the galleries of Europe with a quiet determination, placing my canvases on walls that had only known the polished, smooth faces of kings and saints. The people who walked past these paintings at first looked away, confused by the thick, heavy strokes that seemed to breathe and tremble. They expected the soft edges of perfection, but they found the rough truth of the earth and the sky. Slowly, the light began to change in the eyes of those who stopped to look. The young painters in Paris, with their own burning eyes and restless hands, saw in my work a permission to break the rules they had been taught. They took the red and the green and the blue and pushed them further, letting the colors scream instead of whisper. The movement they called expressionism grew from the soil I had tilled, and the wild, untamed colors of the fauves bloomed from the seeds I had scattered in the wind. A specific fact often goes unnoticed in the rush of history. The very first painting I ever sold during my lifetime, The Red Vineyard, was bought by a Belgian artist named Annebach for 400 francs, a sum that would barely cover a month of rent in Paris today. This small transaction was a quiet anchor in a sea of storms, a single point of contact that proved the world could see me. It was not a roar of acceptance, but a whisper that grew into a chorus over the decades. The silence of the studio where I mixed my paints has echoed across oceans, finding new life in the halls of museums from New York to Tokyo. The thick layers of paint, applied with a palette knife or a brush held stiff in a shaking hand, have survived the passing of a century. Their texture still rough enough to catch the light. The air in these great rooms is cool and still, filtered through high windows that let in a pale, diffused light. The floor is made of polished wood, dark and smooth, reflecting the shadows of the people who move slowly from one canvas to another. A single guard stands near the corner, his uniform a deep, muted blue, his eyes scanning the crowd with a gentle, unobtrusive vigilance. The paintings hang on walls painted a soft, neutral color, a backdrop that allows the swirling stars and the cypress trees to leap forward. The silence here is not empty. It is filled with the soft shuffling of feet, the quiet intake of breath, and the distant hum of the city outside. The smell of old varnish mixes with the scent of rain that has just fallen on the pavement, creating a scent that feels timeless. In this quiet space, the noise of the world falls away, leaving only the conversation between the viewer and the image. The influence of these works spread like water finding its level, seeping into the foundations of how we see the world. The way I captured the motion of the wind in the wheat fields taught others to look for the movement hidden in stillness. The way I painted the night sky, not as a black void, but as a swirling river of blue and gold, changed the way people look up. The stars are no longer just distant points of light. They are alive, breathing, and moving. This shift in vision has touched every corner of the modern world, from the advertisements on the street to the screens in our pockets. The images of my sunflowers and my bedrooms are known to children who have never heard my name. Their colors burned into the collective memory of humanity. The legacy is not a statue of stone that stands cold and unmoving, but a living thing that grows and changes with each generation. It is the way a young painter in a small town picks up a brush and feels a connection to the struggle and the joy of the past. It is the way a weary traveler stands before a canvas and feels a sudden, unexpected peace. The work remains a testament to the power of seeing the world as it is, with all its flaws and its beauty. The colors have not faded, though the years have passed. The reds still burn with the heat of the Mediterranean sun, and the blues still hold the depth of the ocean. The silence that follows the last sentence is not an end, but a pause, a moment of rest before the next breath is drawn. The story continues, not in words written by my hand, but in the eyes of those who stop to look, to feel, and to remember. The journey of the soul that began in the streets of Arles and ended in the quiet of a small room in Auvergne.